Everyone believes I'm loyal, but I've been secretly planning to leave my husband for my ex, and hearing the sentence in my own mouth feels like chewing tinfoil, bright, wrong, and impossible to swallow. I'm Camila, I'm 34, and I'm a public defender, which means I spend my days asking judges to see the human inside the paperwork and my nights pretending that if I stack enough clean dishes I can make my life look lawful. I'm the woman who carries two phones, one that rings in rooms with flags and one that vibrates in bathrooms where clients cry. And I'm the woman who still remembers the pattern of a man's knuckles on a steering wheel from a decade ago the way other people remember hymns. When people say I'm loyal, they mean I show up. They don't know I've been using the word like a decoy. My husband is Matteo. He's a pediatrician whose pockets are full of stickers and whose heart is full of the sort of patience I have to manufacture. He is gentle in a way that doesn't exhaust him. He makes soup without recipes and fixes wobbly chair legs with the same look he gives a fever, mild concern followed by competent love. He keeps our house stocked with citrus and mercy. My mother says he has a forehead you can trust, which is her small-town metric for men who will not accidentally burn the casserole or your future. He calls me Milagro when he's soft and Counselor when he's teasing, and both nicknames sit in my chest like good furniture. The ex is Raphael. No nickname, the name is already a knife. He's a muralist who never met a wall he didn't want to argue into beauty, the kind of man who looks at peeling paint and sees a map. We were together from 21 to 27, 2 apartments, 1 dog, a dozen fights we called debates because we liked pretending our temper was a philosophy. We split because his work kept insisting he say yes to cities that didn't know me, and my work kept insisting I show up for people who could not follow me anywhere else. He left with 1 suitcase and a sketchbook. I stayed with a plant that died of confusion. The plan did not begin with suitcases. It began with a schedule change. That's what we call betrayal when we're trying to keep it polite. I moved my caseload around under the pretext of trial clusters, a phrase that sounds like a snack and acts like a fog. Wednesday evenings became mysteriously available. I told my supervisor I needed the time to prepare a big suppression hearing. She nodded because I'm the person who wins the ugly motions and remembers birthdays. I told Matteo I joined a yoga class because my back talks like an old man. He kissed the top of my head and sent me a link to a mat with real traction. If you want a cleaner inciting incident, it's an email with no subject line. In town for a commission. 3 weeks. If you ever wanted to see the wall before the city does, I'll be there at dawn. He didn't sign it, but the words carried his elbow. The mural was going up on the side of a community clinic I know well, the place where my clients get their blood work and their dignity handed back in paper cups. I should have answered with, proud of you. Good luck. I should have shown Matteo the email and laughed at the fever of youth. Instead, I stood in our kitchen with my hands on the cool edge of the counter as if the laminate could vote. Dawn is a profession for some people. For me, it's a confession. I went. I told myself I was going to the clinic anyway to drop flyers about expungement because that was also true. He was on scaffolding in paint-splattered pants and a t-shirt that had learned how to be a rag. The wall was half sky, half rumor. He climbed down with the loose caution of someone who has argued with gravity long enough to respect it. He didn't hug me, which was merciful. He said Cam, and the sound of it opened a drawer I'd nailed shut. We walked for coffee and not coffee. He pointed out what the wall would be when it stopped pretending, hands, birds, a grandmother with a jaw that wouldn't lose. I pointed out the courthouse planters where people smoke when hope is a nicotine patch. We tried doing the thing people do when they're not fools. We stayed outside feelings where light could surveil us. It almost worked. Then he said, "You look tired," with the kind of seeing that counts your hours. I told him I sleep like a witness, on alert, contradictory. He smiled without gloating. "Still allergic to Simple?" he asked. "Still addicted to it," I said. Planning to leave is not falling. It is filing. I made a list called after and hid it in a folder named CLE_credits. The list had sublists, housing, a studio near the train so my clients can still find me, money, split accounts in ways that do not punish him for my choice, friends who will forgive, who will require footnotes, clothes, which ones belong to a wife, which ones belong to a person. I am not romantic, I am meticulous. I priced kettles like I was buying a personality. I practiced saying I need to separate in the shower until the tiles looked bored. Everyone believes I'm loyal, I told my sister on the phone while I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot, the good place for small truths. She is a nurse with a high tolerance for blood and a low tolerance for nonsense. Who do you want to be loyal to right now, she asked. The honest version of me, I said, which sounds like a sticker you put on a water bottle. And which one is that, she pressed. I had no answer that didn't make me flinch. Matteo and I are gentle professionals. We run a tidy household. He labels leftovers like we'll be audited by the future. I alphabetize the spice rack when I can't make a verdict yield. We are not unhappy. We are, what is the word all my clients hate, stable. On Saturdays, we go to the farmer's market and argue kindly about plums. On Sundays, he meal preps while I iron shirts because the week needs crisp edges if it's going to behave. At night, he reads medical journals in bed and laughs at a terrible joke about spleens. I lie beside him and love him cleanly and hate myself for wanting a mess. Back at the wall, the city showed up predictably late. The councilwoman posed with a hard hat. An intern thrust a clipboard toward anyone who looked like a donor. I stood with Raphael and pretended our shared history was civic pride. He told the story to the microphones well, that the grandmother's hands in the mural were inspired by a woman he'd met at a bus stop who was carrying 2 grocery bags and a lifetime you could see if you looked. He didn't say her name was my grandmother, that I once told him about the way she held a rosary like a rope. He didn't say I was the person who taught him to ask for the story under the story. He is not cruel. Neither am I. That's the worst part. The plan grew muscle. I visited a studio apartment and ran my hands along the windowsill like a pianist checking a new instrument. I insisted on a lock that would not stick in bad weather. I told the landlord I couldn't move in for 6 weeks because I had a transition at work. I transferred a small legal amount of money into an account under my maiden name because I have watched women stay for lack of cab fare, and I am not willing to be a statistic my clients cite in group therapy. I drafted an email to my therapist that began, I need to confess to the part of me that thinks confession is a tactic. Raphael kept his distance in all the correct ways. He sent photos of the wall's progress without commentary. He came to my suppression hearing and sat in the back row like he'd bought a cheap seat to a show he'd seen me perform 100 times. The hearing went badly and then well, my favorite kind of victory because it remembers its own cost. My client cried. The DA shook my hand like we were on the same team in a sport I don't play. Outside on the courthouse steps, Raphael stayed far enough, near enough. Proud, he said. Of the law. I teased. Of you, he answered, and I tucked the sentence into the lining of my coat like contraband. I wish I could tell you the first kiss happened by accident, that we tripped over civic duty and fell into a movie. The truth is it was a decision we made in slow motion. We were in his borrowed studio surrounded by paint that had learned how to be air. He was showing me a small sketch he called study, as if the word could discipline desire. I reached to touch the corner of the page. He reached too. Our fingers did what fingers have always done when they recognize their old job. We stood very still in that dumb brave silence humans invented to pretend they aren't about to do what they are about to do. Then we did it. And in the middle of it my brain, loyal procedural, asked whether I had turned off the stove at home, which is maybe the worst sort of poetry. After, there was the usual flood, the kind with debris and astonishment. There was also the ordinary, my phone alarm saying call Ms. Torres about her son's arraignment. I called. I set a hearing. I answered 2 emails. I wiped a streak of Prussian blue off my wrist like a newly guilty person adjusting a sleeve. I went home to Matteo, who had made arroz con pollo and saved me the skin because he knows I revert to childhood when I'm wrung out. I ate the skin and almost told him everything. People think the leaving happens in one big scene. It doesn't. It happens in 98 small ones. It happens when you are packing for a 2-day training and stop midway because you realize you're packing like you're never coming back. It happens when you go to Target for dish soap and stand in the aisle unable to choose a scent because all of them feel like infidelity. It happens when your husband asks, "Do you want the bigger half?" and you realize you have been taking the smaller half as penance for months. It happens when your ex texts a photo of a blank wall and you type, "I want it," about 10 different things at once. I told one person close to Matteo before I told him, our friend Priya, who's known us since we were two poor humans with one couch. I asked for a favor. When it happens, I said, "Don't hate me louder than necessary in public." She said, "I won't hate you in public," and then added, "I will hate you in my kitchen, which is private, and then I will feed you both." I said, "That sounds like due process." She said, "Don't flatter yourself, it's soup." When I finally began the conversation with Matteo, I did it wrong and right. Wrong because I waited until a late Sunday when the house had the soft, forgiving light that makes everything look worth saving. Right because I did it at the table, not in the doorway, not in a car, not with a suitcase in the hall. "I need to separate," I said, and my mouth sat inside the syllables like a defendant trying to stand straight. He blinked in the way kind men blink when the air changes pressure. He put his hands flat on the wood. He did not ask who. He asked when. I said soon because I couldn't bear to say, "I have already been leaving in increments." He said the good man things first. "Are you safe? Are you sure?" Then the honest man thing, "Is this about him?" I said yes because lying is a trap that makes every future chair uncomfortable. He nodded like a doctor learning bad results. He will have to explain gently. "Have you already?" he began. I said yes. He stood up as though the chair had been pulled a centimeter out of place by a ghost. He walked to the sink, ran the faucet, turned it off. He did the circuit you do when you want a small task to replace a hulking truth. Then he turned back with eyes that were not kind and not unkind. They were new. "You were my sure thing," he said. "And I was yours." I cried because I have never wanted to be a sure thing less, and I have never wanted to be one more. The days that followed were an administrative apocalypse softened by the fact that we loved each other well enough to be decent. We made lists, lease, utilities, cat staying with him, she prefers the steady heartbeat, couch he keeps it, my new studio could not survive its honesty, books split by category, poetry to the criminal, cookbooks to the pediatrician. We were so polite we almost got away with thinking we were noble. Then grief elbowed in, rude, necessary. He said, "I don't want to be congratulated on my maturity, I want to be loved." I said, "I don't want to be forgiven, I want to be allowed." We stood there, two adults in a kitchen built to encourage cooperation, and we told the truth so plainly that the salt shaker wanted to clap. Raphael waited the way a person does when they are trying to be a good man inside a story that keeps nominating them for the wrong award. He didn't text me pictures of beds. He didn't say, "Come now." He sent a photo of a wall halfway done and wrote, "The grandmother's hands still don't look like they know they're strong," and beneath that, "When you are ready to be seen without being rescued, I'll be at the corner of 12th and Green with a brush." He is better now than he was when we were young. So am I. Our improved selves are still capable of harm. The night before I moved into the studio, I slept in my own house like a guest between seasons. I ran my hand along the banister Matteo refinished last summer just because he wanted our hands to slide kindly from one floor to the next. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the art we'd bought from a kid who drew birds as if they'd applied for the job of being birds and aced the interview. I said thank you to furniture. I said I'm sorry to a plant. I said nothing into the closet because the clothes knew. Moving day was uneventful in the way a well-planned surgery is supposed to be. It still ends with a scar. Priya arrived with soup and a roll of blue tape and the refusal to let anyone be dramatic before hydration. The studio was smaller than my plans and bigger than my courage, which is my favorite kind of room. I put the kettle on because water is my ritual for consent. Raphael didn't come. He texted me a photo of the grandmother's finished hands and the caption ready, which I pretended was about paint. I lay on the floor and put my palm on my chest and instructed my heart to behave like a citizen. I didn't run to him that night. I stayed with my boxes and myself, and I learned where the window insists and where the floor complains. The next morning I made coffee strong enough to resurrect an argument. I walked to the wall not because romance demanded it, but because I wanted to look a decision in the face while sober. He was there in a paint-stained hoodie, cheeks red from cold, looking like someone who had chosen a life that would always try to ruin his shoes. He saw me and did not smile in the way men have learned to be careful with women who have just set a house down. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I said. We stood with the wall between us like a chaperone. "We are not saints." He held out a brush. "You can sign one line if you want," he offered, "one that nobody will see unless they know where to look." I drew the smallest curve inside the grandmother's knuckle, a tendon that would keep her finger from giving up. "That's the part that breaks first," I said. He nodded. "Not today," he said. Then we went for coffee and not coffee, and he reached for my elbow at a crosswalk the way he always has, and I let him, and the light changed and we crossed like citizens. Leaving a good person for someone whose name hums in your mouth is not romantic. It's expensive in money and reputation and sleep. It's also a choice I'm not going to varnish for you with metaphors about fate. Here's what I have instead: a new key on my ring that sticks unless you ask it nicely. A husband I am not married to who texts me pictures of the cat asleep on a book I left behind and who knows I don't need commentary, just evidence that the world I loved is still operating. A man I am learning again slower who asks me every week, "Do you want rescue or witness?" and waits while I choose. A job that does not forgive my romance and that I refuse to let suffer for it. My clients still get my best sentences and my cleanest ties. Everyone believes I'm loyal. Some days I think they're right. Loyalty is not a person, it's a practice. Today it looks like calling my mother and telling her the truth before somebody else's version finds her at church. It looks like showing up to a client's sentencing with a memo I wrote at 2 a.m. and eyes that do not beg for pity. It looks like texting Mateo when the radiator in the old place knocks like a bad joke and sending him the number of a plumber because advice is love that doesn't require intimacy. It looks like telling Raphael no when my body thinks yes would be a shortcut and my integrity knows the scenic route is the only way to arrive alive. Tonight I will stand at my studio window and watch the neighborhood decide what kind of evening it wants: bikes and strollers, a fight on the corner that's really two men trying not to cry, a kid practicing a jump shot like he believes repetition changes physics. I will heat soup I did not make. I will put on music that does not audition for our past. I will write tomorrow's cross-examination questions in a notebook that still smells like a store. Later, if I walk to the wall, I will walk slow. I will put my hand on the painted grandmother's hand and borrow her tendon for a minute. I will tell her thank you for holding. I will tell her I'm learning. I will go home, home means this one now, and I will put my phone face down and I will sleep like a witness who finally turned in her testimony and waits to see what the court of her own life decides. And if I wake at 3 with my heart subpoenaing me, I will sit up, drink water, and read the list of reasons I chose this corridor. Not the poem list, the one that says, "My mouth will not lie in the kitchen, my feet will not learn 2 routes to the same house, my hands will paint 1 line at a time." I will remind myself that the opposite of loyalty is not leaving, it is pretending. I will try tomorrow and then the next day to be loyal to the life that looks me in the eyes and calls me by the name I sign under oaths, the one that fits on a line nobody sees unless they know where to look.